Hi, my name is Lena. My long revenge story. This story takes place almost 12 years ago, so I'll do my best with the dialogue and details, but admittedly, some things are a little fuzzy. Most of my life, I've had a problem with picking men that were not good for me, so much so that I even had a phrase for it: saving the world, one moron at a time. One of my more spectacularly bad choices was a guy by the name of Bob, obviously not his real name. I met Bob when I was working one of my two jobs at the local mall. He worked somewhere else in the mall, so we hit it off, and soon enough we were in a relationship. Within a few months my lease was up and we ended up moving in together, which obviously in hindsight was a huge mistake, but I was dumb and lonely. Soon enough red flags began to fly. He would say things in common conversation that were simply incorrect, like there's only 4 continents and the rest are actually owned by the Martian government and thus don't count, etc. And when challenged, would circular talk until you either agreed with him or dropped the subject. He would also make claims that seemed entirely unbelievable, such as when I asked where he had been staying prior to his mom's house, he said he camped in the woods. When I asked how he did that for months on end and without any gear, he simply gestured to himself and said, "This is all the gear I need." The worst trait, though by far, was his epic laziness. I have never witnessed someone so lazy in my life. Bob was unemployed for over a third of our relationship and would simply sit in the apartment watching Netflix or playing some war game on his computer, aka my spare computer, typing away in the group chat. He would never clean up after himself, leaving dirty dishes in the sink and filth on every surface, while only taking a shower maybe once a week. The smell that permeated my apartment could only be described as revolting and could easily gag a maggot. Would inquire a few times a week on his job hunt, only to be dismissed or given a growing amount of excuses such as, "But I don't have a car. How would I get there? The bus doesn't run in that area. The internet went down so I couldn't apply," etc., etc. Meanwhile, I am working double and triple shifts at my job to try to make up the lost income and running him all over town in my off time, getting applications and helping him fill them out and turn them in. Keep in mind he doesn't have a cell phone, so all of these apps have my contact info on them. Thus begins the era of him holding my phone while I'm at work so he can make calls or schedule interviews, as well as I can get a hold of him from my store phone if I needed to. Things began getting weird. He began staying up later and later on this group chat, sometimes till almost dawn. Sometimes we would hang out all evening until it was time for bed. Then he would always make some excuse on why he needed to check the game before bed, and he'd be right there. Hours would pass. "No, Bob." I began to get suspicious, but nothing incriminating seemed to be taking place, so I just shrugged it off as me being insecure. Then he started asking to use my car to go see his best friend, Ben. Now, I wasn't super comfortable with this, but I did know Ben pretty well, and we got along almost better than Bob and I did. So I guess to a degree I trusted Ben more than Bob and agreed to it. This happened a few times while I was working the evening shift, and he was always back at the allotted time with my car and my phone and relatively grateful for the opportunity to hang with his buds. Suspicious? Yes. But I'm the kind of person that is loyal and trusting to a fault and don't assume anything without proof, and from every angle all seemed to be on the up and use, so I took it at face value. So one day he asks to borrow my car and go with his friends to a card gaming tournament. He put on a great show, telling me how the prize money would help us out, and with the deck he had there was no way he could lose. I just had to let him use my car and phone this one last time, and he would be able to buy himself a phone with the prize money. I wasn't a huge fan of the idea, but nothing untoward had occurred in the previous instances. and I didn't feel like spending my only day off at a card game convention that I literally couldn't care less about, so I acquiesced. I bought myself a couple green monsters and some vodka and had my own little personal drunk party. Hours tick by and no Bob. Eventually I pass out only to wake up at the crack of dawn violently sick. This went way beyond a hangover. I start retching in the bathroom until there was nothing left but bile, but the retching wouldn't stop. Hours ticked by and I lay in my bathroom, floor sweating and convulsing, with no phone, no car and no Bob. I eventually was able to crawl to my room and wrap myself in a bathrobe before crawling down my apartment building stairs and began knocking on the closest doors. It took 3 apartments before someone opened the door and allowed me to use their phone to call my mom. My mother was at my apt in 6 minutes flat and rushed me to the ER where I was diagnosed with an aggressive and antibiotic-resistant strain of C. diff. Bob finally showed up later that afternoon, phone and car keys in hand, looking very concerned and claiming to be deeply apologetic. But my mom hated him from that point on. I was out of the hospital and back to work within a few days, but it was the beginning of the end. During these last months, we were constantly scraping by due to his lack of consistent income and poor spending habits. There were jobs gotten and there were jobs lost for various reasons throughout our relationship, but the final job was when I helped him get literally 3 buildings down from my own workplace. This company rents furniture and electronics on a weekly or monthly basis, and I happen to know most of the employees and the hiring manager as they are regular customers at my coffee establishment. I was able to use what little sway I had to get him on there, and he accepted a job as a delivery man. Within a few weeks I come home from work to find a brand new TV and entertainment system, and him grinning like an idiot. I tell him we can't afford this. We can barely afford to eat and are surviving off scraps I bring home from work. He talks about his amazing employee discount and assures me it's no big deal, that the rental fee will just come out of his check, etc. I was pissed. Not only had he not consulted me, he also had me on the account as well. My info had been taken from the credit app I filled out as a favor to help their numbers, so if he flagged I was liable. Fast forward another few weeks. The rent is late and we are receiving eviction notices on our door. I come home from work and the TV is mysteriously gone. Thank goodness, I think. He finally realized we can't afford it and took it back. He gets paid, rent gets paid, and all is as good as it can be. Until I found a pawn slip for the TV in his pocket as I was doing laundry, and went ballistic. He assured me he had plans to get it back in the works and to not worry about it. It will be taken care of soon and no one will be the wiser. I was too pissed to catch on to the secrecy aspect of the situation. A few more tense weeks go by with him working mornings and myself working evenings while we shared one phone and car until that fateful day arrived. I woke up that morning with a migraine headache and opted to let Bob take the car but leave me the phone so I can call someone later on for a ride to work. A few hours of uncomfortable sleep go by before I am awoken by my phone. I answer the phone, still groggy. Hello. I felt a sickening feeling in my gut and began to shake. Is this real? Am I dreaming? No. He's at work right now. This is his wife. Total lie, but hey. Is there something I can help you with? I wasn't rude. I phrased it as a genuine question rather than an accusation. Another long pause before she began to stammer about maybe she had the wrong number, but it was obvious she just wanted to get off the phone with me as quickly as possible, and I realized in that moment that I desperately needed her. Another long pause before she began to stammer about maybe she had the wrong number, but it was obvious she just wanted to get off the phone with me as quickly as possible, and I realized in that moment that I desperately needed her. "Please," I said with an edge of desperation in my voice. "I don't know what's going on, but I just really need somebody to tell me the truth." The last word came out in a sob, and I sat there for a moment in silence, trying to quell the urge to just cry uncontrollably. Listen, the voice on the other end was almost gentle. "I need to make a few phone calls, but I promise you I will call you back." She said it calmly and with so much conviction that I really wanted to believe her. "Please, you promise?" I almost begged. "I promise," she replied. "Okay." I took a deep breath and released it. "I'll talk to you soon," and hung up. I then proceeded to aggressively pace my living room floor, staring at my phone. There is a long pause while chain smoking the other end of the line until a female voice asks, "Is Bob there?" Crazy person. I knew who she was calling. I was replaying all those little red flag moments in my head from the last few months, pinning down dates or a behavior I'd found suspect. When the phone rings again, "It's her." I froze for a moment, shocked she followed through and called me back, terrified of what this meant. I answered the phone, and what followed was about the most soul-crushing 45 minutes of my life. After initial introductions, June, again not the real name, and I began comparing stories, and it became glaringly obvious what was happening. They had actually been in a relationship several years prior and had run back into each other on the aforementioned war game, where they began to flirt on group chat. All those nights he'd been on the computer, he'd been chatting with her. All those times he'd go hang out with his friends, he been using my car to take her out and my phone to communicate with her. The time I was sick and alone with no resources. You guessed it, he was with her. Oh, but it gets better. "Do you have a little silver hummingbird necklace?" she inquired. "Yes. My mother gave it to me for my 27th birthday. Actually, I love it." "Really?" she said, "'cause he gave me one for Mother's Day." OMG, I almost yelled into the phone as I ran to my room and tore through my jewelry box. It wasn't in there. It was around her neck. From there we discovered not only had he been giving her my property as gifts, but he'd had her over to our apartment, passing it off as his own. I didn't want to believe him capable of doing something so cruel and disrespectful when I have allowed him to sponge off me for the better part of 3 years. Unfortunately, as in confirmation, she began describing my apartment to a T, all the way down to my bed sheets. June said he even pulled my secret box from beneath my bed and offered to use my adult items on her. She said she found it weird and didn't partake, but I threw them away due to the sheer ick factor. Finally, she uttered the words I didn't know I wanted to hear. "You know what we should do? We should bust him together." My mind immediately started racing. Indeed, we should. I was a mix of fury, adrenaline, and despair, so my thinking wasn't exactly straight, and details begin to get hazy here. We arranged to meet up at my work and find a way to lure Bob over there, but unfortunately, she lived about 40 minutes away, whereas I only live about 6 miles from our destination, so if I got there first, I'd need to stall him, assuming he wasn't out on a delivery. I called a trusted co-worker of mine at work, sobbing and begging for a ride. To his everlasting credit, he got somebody to cover and left work to come get me and bring me to my car. When I got to Bob's workplace, I went inside to retrieve my keys. This isn't uncommon, as they know the car is mine, and was stopped halfway through store by Bob's manager wanting to talk about the payment due on our